Hi everybody, this is Brandon with Step Rock Media. Welcome back to another video about 3D printing. Thank you for everybody who enjoyed and found use out of the video where I rewired an MP Mini. We're back. Working on the Mini is my printer of choice over here for printing. What we're going to do today is figure out how to use Blender for 3D printing. I'll be using this is the latest release right now. It's 2.79B. I'm using Cura 321. There's newer versions of Cura, but I happen to like this release, so whatever. If your interface of Blender looks different and you've got a newer release, how's the future? Do you have flying cars yet? Blender has been working on a beta release that changes a lot of stuff and changes around the interface, but the tools and tricks and approach that I'm showing you here should still apply in that case. But without further ado, let's jump in. You've probably heard that Blender is a terrific, open, community-driven piece of software that you can get for free. It's really great, really powerful. No restrictions on what you can do, like the number of polygons, for example. And that's all true. You've probably also heard that it has a ridiculously steep learning curve. Probably also true. I'm going to try to flatten that out. So what this is going to be is kind of a Blender crash course. Specifically for those of you who are using it for the purposes of 3D printing. Okay, so it's very specific here, so I'm not going to be able to cover all things Blender. Give me a little space, please. I've really attempted to do this video, I think the third or fourth time trying to get this right, so I'm going to go with it, and I'm sorry if I screw anything up, but I really want to get this video out. It's rattling through my head, and I want to help out the 3D printing community as much as possible. But yeah, I probably won't get things perfect, and I've got to stop trying to be such a perfectionist. Stop that. Let's jump in. Blender is going to allow you to work in a mesh mode, which means you can get right down here into the vertexes, right? Work on the individual faces and the points and all that stuff. You can also switch gears and work into a curves mode, which is really cool. There you go. You got to make do noise or the software doesn't work. Curves are, these curves are like Bezier curves if you're accustomed to that kind of thing. If you ever want to do make a logo and import an SVG of your logo, this is what you would be doing, using these curves kind of an environment. I'm going to be working on the mesh version mostly here, just for the purposes of showing you the interface and how to get up and running really fast. Good news, bad news. Good news, Blender is ridiculously powerful. It has got features out the wazoo. You've probably gotten ridiculously confused if you've tried to watch any tutorials or figure out Blender. Okay, that's kind of a good news, bad news type thing. Good news for you as a 3D printer, you don't need most of it, okay? I'm going to skip all the stuff you don't need, and we're going to go into just the things that you do need, and we'll start right now. Basic camera controls, basically moving around here. You're going to need a mouse with a middle scroll wheel that can be pressed down, because when you press it down, you're orbiting, okay? If you hold down Shift while you're doing that same maneuver, you're panning around, okay? In and out with the scroll wheel, pressing down on the middle mouse button and holding Shift, holding just the middle mouse button down. You get those different movements. So those are very important for being able to successfully move around. Next thing is your keyboard. You're going to want a full number pad. Otherwise, you have to manually go down here and hit View. And you see all this down here, Control plus number pad, blah, 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 blah. That's all there. Hit 1 on your number pad for front view. And you can see it up here. It says front ortho. That's your orthographic view. If you were in perspective view, that's like a real 3D kind of a world. I like to work in orthographic, which means I'm going to press 5 on the number pad. And you'll see front user ortho, because I rotated the camera around. 1, we go back to front. 3, we're at the right. 7, we're at the top. Okay? Pretty easy to move around. So that might not be obvious in the software. So that's why I'm pointing that out. Other thing is, we don't really need these guys there, so we're going to get rid of them. We're going to right-click to select. Newer versions of Blender, I believe, are changing that around to where you left click. This is one of those weird things about Blender that people just have to get used to. At least they do at the moment. Right click to select things. We don't need lights and cameras because we're not rendering. We're going to right click and hit the delete button on our keyboard, and it's out of there. Bye lights, bye cameras. There you go. Next thing we're going to do that's going to be really helpful is hit the N key for number. Numeric. I might as well get this out of the way right now. People use shortcuts like mad in Blender. If you ever watch anybody's tutorial, they're going to tell you, hold Alt, Shift, Command, R, blah, 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 blah. It gets ridiculous. It gets way down into the weeds. all the stuff that you might want to do is in here in the menu, so don't be afraid to go and click through menus. But the truth is, it's just so much easier just to tell people what the keyboard shortcut is for anything. It's kind of a pain in the butt to say, slide down here, click on this, scroll up there. You have to let go of your work. So people tend to do tutorials where they just say, tab, 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 shift, 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 all that kind of stuff. So that is just the way people do tutorials in Blender. But rest assured, any command that you have is indeed down here in the menus, all right? That being said, let's take a look at the menus. Right up here in the top left, you're going to want this one, the tools for translate, rotate, scale, all that jazz. Translate means to move, and the shortcut is G. So usually I just use G to grab. Remember it that way. G, grab it. Now you move it. Grab it and move it. Cool. But what they don't tell you is if you press X, Y, or Z after you do that, G to grab it, Z, weird thing about Blender, up and down is Z. What are you going to do? Z, now it locks it down to that Z axis. I could have done X or Y. I got a microphone in front of my face, so I can't see my keyboard. I shouldn't have to look at my keyboard anyway. You're right. I shouldn't have to look at my keyboard. The other thing you can do is while you've selected that object, I can press on using the left button, grab any of those points, zoop, 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 and do the same exact thing. Cool, huh? Rotating. I'm rotating in a crazy way, but I could also rotate with R, press Z. Now I'm rotating in Z. Lock it down to Z. I can further control what I'm doing, whether it's moving or rotating or anything, by holding down Control, and it does this tap, 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 tap kind of thing. You can see that better if I grab with G. I'll press X to move, and I'll hold down Control. See? Kind of jumps around. That's useful. Alternatively, if you hold Shift, doing the same thing, holding down Shift while you move it, it does itty-bitty moves. That is true all over, even in these numeric menus over to the side, okay? Pardon me. I told you I'm just going to roll with this thing. I may have to take a sip of water. Last time I've tried to do these videos, I've lost my voice in the middle of it. Cool. The other menu that you're going to want is the Create menu. Shortcut for that is just to hit Shift-A, and you invoke a pop-up menu for the same thing. But these are all your standard primitives. These are the ones you're going to care about. Add a plane, add a cube, UV sphere, icosphere. Fiddle around with it. They'll make more sense. What will not make sense, unless I tell you, I'm going to delete this cube. What will not necessarily make sense is these two things. I'm going to add a cylinder and be aware of this little panel down here. See the vertexes? When you're doing printing, this is going to be important. You've only got 32 vertices. Why do I keep saying that? Vertices, the faces that are on this print job. You can see them right there. It will print that way. Okay. In 3D world, we can smooth it out in post-production, but in printing world, you really need to give yourself some vertexes to work with. You can't change that after you leave this menu without some difficulty, so make sure you do that. The other thing is that you are adding it as radius. It is 1 Blender unit radius, which over here in the dimensions, it's 2. Okay. It's 2 from edge to edge, the full diameter across the whole thing. The radius is 1. That's important. Bear that in mind because anything that you add, including a cube, the sizing is actually going to be from the center to the radius of it. So if you want, which we're about to do, add a cube of a certain size, you're going to have to measure it from the center to get the actual size you want. It will make sense in just about 2 seconds when we see it over in the side panel. I'm going to go ahead and delete that cube with the delete key. Hit 7 to go to the top view just because I want to. I'm going to hit Shift-A or use something over here on the side. Shift-A is easier. Add an empty, and I'm going to add an empty cube. Why did I do that? This cube is going to represent my build space on my printer. This is not necessary, but it's going to be really, really helpful. Radius, like I just told you, is radius even for a cube. So my build plate, being the MP Mini, it has a 120 millimeter build volume. You guessed it, kids and kittens. 60 is the number we want. Where did the cube go? It's too big. It's outside of the view. I'm going to scroll way, 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 way out. Fun fact, if you were to jump over here to Cura, careful, it's about to get bright. If you were to jump over here to Cura and import anything that you build just by default, it'll be a tiny little thing in the middle of the space. So watch your sizing. That's why I had you bring up that numeric side panel over here. Pardon me. So there we go. So now we've got this guy to the correct size. So now it's 120 millimeters, and I'll go ahead and orbit around here, show you that. There we go. So if we want to start doing a little bit of modeling in here, we can, but it'd probably make a little more sense for me to give you a quick tour of the rest of the software. You don't need most of it. There you go. There's your tour. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. You do you do need some of it, but most of the stuff you don't need. That's great news for you. Look at this. We've got relations and animations and physics and grease pencil, which is kind of a cool pencil look when you render stuff. You don't need any of that stuff, guys. It's not important for you as a 3D modeler. Down here, what you're going to want to do is go from object mode to edit mode. I need to add an object in here to actually be able to show you that. So let's go ahead and grab that. I'll hit S to scale. Or you could go up here to hit tools and scale. Once you do that, you've grabbed the object automatically, so it's a little bit weird. Watch, did you see that? Blender allows you to take the mouse clean through the screen. It wraps. I'm easily amused, though. And we can see the dimensions over here, so we know that if it were 120 by 120 by 120, it would fill my entire print volume, and I wouldn't be able to actually print it. So you can control that numerically. I know what you're probably asking. Okay, 120 what? You said millimeters. What is it? It's Blender units. That's the truth of it. It's Blender units. You can go in here and invoke a thing that says millimeters, but it really doesn't matter. Just get used to the fact that the dimensions are going to be interpreted by Cura, the slicer over here. When we import 120 Blender units, it's going to import that as 120 millimeters. So they will talk to each other. So don't worry about that. So just work in Blender units over here and imagine that they're millimeters. There is, like I said, there is a way in here, and it doesn't matter to set that up to tell it that your units are millimeters, but just work in Blender units and you'll be just fine. So there we go. There's your cube. Back down to where we were. Object mode versus edit mode is all you really need to worry about here. These two guys, they're going to be your friends, and it's easy to get back and forth by hitting the tab button. Tab, 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 tab. If you've got Blender and you haven't opened it already, open it. Getting a sip of water. Sorry about that. Did you open Blender? Are you ready? Follow along. Tab, 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 tab. It will start out with a cube in the first place, and you can get in there and fiddle around. Well, tab, it selected everything. So we'll hit A to select all. It's down here. Select, deselect all. And I usually do a select all, deselect all, because the number of times I've been up here fiddling with, 2 points up here, and I'm modeling and I'm building stuff, and it turns out I've actually selected something on the other side of the model. Yeah, it's ridiculous. That's 3D world for you. You got to be careful. So I'm always select all, deselect all to make sure I don't have anything. But once we're in here, that will bring up our next section here, which is vertexes, edges, or faces. We can work in any mode we like to, so that's up to you. Whatever makes sense for what you're doing. See that? These little points just lit up, and we can right-click again. If you're in the newer version, I do believe it's left-click now, and the overall interface changes a bit. But the principles are still all the same. It's still Blender. I'm going to grab that face there, and using scale, I'll just hit S. I can scale up that face. I'll go to the front view with the 1 that I just told you about, and look at that. I've got a little trapezoid. I could also grab it and drag it down. And we've got a nice flat kind of a trapezoid, right? You know what would make a lot of sense is if I had any clue what the heck I was building right now instead of just winging it, but what are you going to do? We're going to make something cool, though. It'll be so darned useful, you won't believe it. So we can work in any different modes right up in here. Tab to get out of that. Another thing I want to show you before we go away here is this kind of an X-ray mode. It's View Z. It's in there someplace. Again, it's one of those things. Blender has got so many little fiddly bits all through here. It just gets to be useless to try to find it in the menus at all. It's just better to learn a few keyboard shortcuts. And if they're the common ones that I'm telling you, it's not that many keyboard shortcuts to remember. But hit Z, and you get into an X-ray kind of a mode. That's pretty helpful. Similarly, down here, if we have this little cube right there, limit selection, Blender explains stuff in it. Limit selection to visible, clipped with depth of buffer, blah, 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 blah. Okay, that allows you to see through it. Really long way to say see-through. So that allows us to select all the way through the entire thing or just on the surface. This is really helpful. Like if we were in the front view and I wanted to select this entire top half like I just did, if I did not have that on and I was not actually selecting through the whole cube, and I've done this about 5 billion times by accident, and I were to try to select the whole front edge, I only get the front edge when what I meant to do is select the entire top half of it. So that see-through mode can be really useful when you actually mean to select through the entire model and get all of it. So that little guy is very useful as well. So all that is very, very useful. This stuff you don't need to worry about. You don't need to worry about. Probably. That's a little more advanced stuff about moving it around. You got shaders and things like that. You're not doing 3D printing, so it really doesn't matter. If this is your timeline for animating, doesn't matter. So much stuff here doesn't matter. Okay, let's jump over to the right side of the screen real quick. Scene, you're not rendering. That doesn't matter. What do you care? All this stuff, scenes and renderings and global lighting and shaders and textures and all that stuff. If you want to get into 3D animating and modeling, Blender is lots of fun. Up here, the Blender cycles, scenes. You don't need that stuff, guys. You can skip so much of the depth of Blender if all you're trying to do is 3D modeling for printing. You could also import a model, which is really great for editing a model that you got. So that's why this software is so useful to you as a 3D printer. There's a couple things in here that I do want to highlight real quickly. This little cube guy right there, it just means your object. It'll allow you to rename your cube, and we're going to call this Thingamabob. Did I spell that right? And you'll see that Thingamabob is now selected down here at the bottom left. Thingamabob. The other one that I like is the modifiers. This takes a little bit of time to dig through and figure out what these modifiers are, but they're really, really helpful. If you don't feel comfortable jumping in here, that's fine. You can get along just fine without worrying about this, but I do want you to be aware that there's a lot of great tools in here. Particularly, I'll point out the Boolean tools. And you see the little icon there, kind of tries to tell you what it is, or a bevel tool. These are really useful to you because you're going to be able to add objects together. I'll add a really quick cube here and show you Boolean just because it really is helpful. And we'll go ahead and I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate it. Z so I can do this little see-through mode. And let's say I wanted to use this cube to cut out a chunk out of the other cube. I'll scale it along the Z axis. These are things that I've just shown you. I'm going to right click for this cube here and we're going to add a Boolean modifier. And I'm going to do a difference modifier. We can either find that cube in a list because we will have named it like I just did. See, we could name it. And we'll just call this guy cut. That'll be the guy we're going to use to cut. So we can choose cut from the list. Or, this is a nice feature, eyedropper tool. And just eyedropper. Now you know that you've got the cut selected. Now this is a modifier, so it hasn't actually applied anything. If you want to go ahead and apply it to the mesh and get ready for doing further edits, you need to apply any of these modifiers. But that means that the cut should have, yeah, there we go. I just grabbed that piece and drew it out. I'll delete it. That cut was just used to knock that chunk out of the middle of it. That's pretty useful. I want to take a pause here. I should have said this near the beginning. If you're making it this far through the video and you're thinking, this is interesting, this is wonderful. So how do I add, say, a 45-degree angled flange and put a 15 mil screw through the object now? Not going to be great for that. I'll be honest right here at the video. Blender is really not great for CAD kind of operations, for mechanical engineering, that sort of thing. This is not going to be your software. What you're seeing me do right now, you can go pretty deep and get pretty complicated and make a zillion different kind of involved models through a lot of basic operations and basic processes. You could also import models from STL files if you want to and edit the devil out of them this way with these basic processes that I'm showing you. But what you're not going to do is involved mechanical engineering type things. I don't think Blender is great for that. Some people out there are real Blender enthusiasts and purists, and they'll probably want to hang me and say, you can't sew, you just need this plugin, or you need to do that. Okay, that may be, but realistically speaking, Blender is just not engineered for engineering. Sorry. But if what I've been doing here so far, making objects, joining them together, fusing them, taking them apart, all that stuff, if that looks like the kind of things that would be interesting and useful to you, then yeah, Blender is going to be great for you. I'll hit, let's show a couple more modeling approaches in here. just for funsies. There's so much in here I could get into. You know, you can add text, you can do curves and edits. It's just, there's a lot going on. But the majority of what I've showed you so far, this is what you're really going to need for modeling for the purpose of 3D printing, and I don't want to waste too much more of your time. We'll finish up with this really simple thingamabob and send it over to Cura just to show you how that works out. Now, we're going to take this mesh right here and we're going to extrude it with the extrude button, which is the E. I'll just hit E, and that means we're going to create more of it. And bring it all the way up there. See there? So now that's a nice solid face. And if we wanted to, we could try that modifier again, see if that guy works. It was a Boolean on that cube. We don't want to intersect. That's going to make a shape where the two intersect one another will be the new shape. In this case, I do want to use a difference modifier with that piece as the cut, and I'll apply it. Grab that cut piece, and I can delete it because I don't need it anymore. And we should have, yep, there it is. We should have a nice little hole cut out of the middle of our model. You can imagine how powerful and useful that would be to you to be able to create that kind of thing. And it is gray on gray right now. It's a little bit weird to look at. Another thing we could do here, we could add more shapes, whether they're curves or other objects, and print them all. You could also, for example, if you've got a model that you've brought in that's not what you like to call watertight or airtight, let's say it was missing a face. I'll delete that face just to show you this. It had an open hole in it that you needed to fill in. This is really common if you've imported a model and it's just not airtight. We'll want to fill that in. A couple things we could do. If you wanted to just join pieces together, you could click, and then I'll shift click to get the next vertex. And there is a menu here, and to tell you the truth, I don't even know how to invoke it, but through the pop-ups, it's in here somewhere. I always hit W to get to it. W gives this little fly-out menu for specials, and it's going to be merge. Merge where? Merge at the first thing you click, the last thing you click, the center. I'll do the center. So I just join those two pieces together to close them up. I'll do the same thing here. We'll merge them at the center, and there we go. We just have a very weird thingamabob right now. The other thing we could have done to close up that hole, we could go click, shift click, shift click, shift click. We'll get all those points. We could also have done that with edges, and we're going to hit F to face it. Boop, fill it in. Face to fill, it's in here too. Again, like I told you, if we try to go through all of the menus, we'll be here all day long. It's just easier to learn a few basic tricks and tips. Selecting stuff, really great feature right here. I'll be in the front mode, make sure I can do the little x-ray see-through kind of a thing. And I'm going to hit B for box to do a box select. And there we go. We've now got the entire top that I wanted. Front view, since we're able to see through it, we can do a box select, and I'll just grab those interior pieces inside that weird little trapezoid Tetris looking thing that I made. And we can grab it along the Z axis and move it up. And I'll hit tab to get out of that. You can see I shallowed out that whole depth. If I go tab again, hit 1 again, go to the front, we could drag that up and make it really shallow. As you guessed already, we could keep going and we'll turn it inside out. Now it's on top of it, right? So it really depends on what the heck you were trying to make here. Almost looks like a tank, doesn't it? If it was a tank, I'd hit AA. Want to make sure I deselect everything. Box select that. Box select that. So now we've got all the outside edges. And we'll hit scale along the Y axis. Bring them all in. Tab, hit Z to get back out of it. Look, we're starting to get a little tank looking thing. So if your kids want you to make a doodad, it's really fun if you've got kids sitting there wanting to say, Mommy, Daddy, add this, add that, do the other thing. That's always a lot of fun to work with kids on that kind of thing. The other way to select stuff is pretty fun. It's a C button. It's in here, select, circle select. I like doing this. C is kind of like a little paintbrush, and you can resize it with the mouse scroll. We can just paint, paint, paint. Get it all, and once you're happy with what you selected, hit enter. That's the kind of things that's just not really obvious in Blender that you have to hit enter to confirm that kind of stuff. But you should be able to sort that out without too much trouble. Okay, like I said, there are about 45 billion things that we could possibly do here, but the best thing for you to do is just to get in here and start fiddling around and doing these basic exercises that I've been showing you right here, and you should be able to start making everything that you want to make. So let's go ahead and take our thing that just became a Tron tank. Take the Tron tank and we'll export him. We'll hit File, Export, and we want to export as an STL file. 3D files folder and demo. Demo is the one I was using anyway. This is a cool demo. It's a tank thing doodad. We'll go over here to Cura. Sorry, it just got bright. And we will import that very same thing, which will be demo. Demo. There he is. And I promise you, after using Blender for a while, when you come over to Cura, you're going to try to rotate holding down the middle mouse button. It's going to take you a minute to compensate in your life. Look at that. Isn't that cool? So we just made a thing over in Blender, and we're able to bring it over here into Cura and get it ready for printing. So that's about the size of it. Right now, if this video was helpful to you, please give me a thumbs up. Thing I hate most is when people just give me a thumbs down as a drive-by and never tell me what the heck I did wrong. I can't improve that way. I'm not trying to monetize the video or anything. I'm doing this just for the help. So if it's helpful to you, let me know that it's helpful to you. And if you have any questions, post them. You'd probably be better off posting them into Blender community, to tell you the truth, into any community forums. I will try to help, though, if I can. And I'm going to sit here and do a little bit more modeling for another minute, and you can watch what I'm doing if you want to learn. But the video is now officially over. Thank you very much. Have a great day. For those of you who are still here, I'm going to drag out this guy, and we're going to use this as a cut because we're about to make some little tracks on our tank. I want them to be easier to print. So I'm going to go to the side view, grab the bottom of it, scale it out along the y-axis, bring it up so it's more of a trapezoid, scale it along the z-axis, grab it, z-axis up, scale along the y. There we go. Boom, 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 boom. And that's about right. Good, good, good. I can grab it along Z and then hold down Shift, so just gently, 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 gently tug it down. You know what else I'm going to do? I kind of like the shape of this. I'm going to hit Shift D, and we duplicate it. I've got it right now, and he's moving free. I want to move him up along Z-axis, so I hit Z, and I'll rotate him, and I'm going to hold down Control while I rotate him with that R so that he flips over nice and evenly. We'll use him in a second. This guy, we're going to do another Boolean difference on that object. Bum, 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 bum. Good enough. Good enough. We'll delete that. Huh, I could have just kept it, huh? So there's that. Good stuff. Good stuff. There we see we've got that. Let's scale that guy. Side view. Another quick tip for those of you who are still along here. If you ever have your models won't import correctly, it could be because the normals are flipped the wrong way. Normals, it means that a 3D model has got an inside and an outside kind of a face. So what you're seeing right now is the outside of it. If we were to be inside of this object, it would actually be completely see-through from the other side of this, and the software doesn't know what the heck to do with it. So if I were to go into the tab and, okay, I've already got that selected, we could flip that one around the other side, the other way. It's called a normal. And what you wanted to do would be to select the whole thing and recalculate the outside correctly. I'll just flip it so that you can see there. That's now incorrect, and it will not print correctly. It usually lights up kind of dark, but I think you have to kind of angle it the right way to see that. What we want to do here is make sure we hit Mesh, Normals, recalculate the outside. You see the color just change right there. You can see it a little bit better in this view. If it won't import and it gets an error, it might be because your normals are flipped the wrong way and it doesn't know what the inside is versus the outside. Box select, bring that out. We all know that this won't print without a lot of supports, but hey. You know what? It's a tank. It doesn't have to be practical. So there you are. The other thing we might do, a good cleanup process, is if you had a complicated model, we'll select all of it and invoke that little menu with the W button that I told you about and hit Remove Doubles. It removes 0 vertices. So we want to make sure that there's no vertexes on top of vertexes, that the thing is actually sealed up. There we go. There's another model for you. let's export this and I'll show you that I didn't even join these two together. They're just two separate blocks, but it'll still work. Over to Cura, about to get bright. And we'll reload that, and look at that. There's our tank. Come on, Cura. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up. There you go. And there's our tank. Last tip, and I'm going to let you all go here. I'm going to sign off here. One bit that I didn't show you down here in the rest of the video, this is layers. You can move things by hitting the M button, or down here, object, it's, I think it's under select. You know, it's weird when you always use keyboard shortcuts, you literally forget where the actual things are because you never click it anymore. M, move to layer. Which layer? Layer 2. It's out of the way. If I hit 2 on my keyboard, not 2 on the number pad, 2 on the actual number line, I can go to layer 2. This will still export when we export it, but it's now out of the way onto a different layer to where we can work with it separately. But you can see down here there's now dots on 2 different layers. I will now move it back to layer 1 and go to layer 1. We could also hold down Shift when we do that and move it to multiple layers. So now it exists on all 3. But let's go ahead and move it to just layer 1. And that would be our default setup right there. Anyway, okay, now that's officially it. That's all I got for you right now. Get in there and fiddle around with the software. It really is the best way to go. Add some text, add some curves, fiddle around, try to import models that you get off Thingiverse. Just go nuts in here. So great. Now I said text and I feel like typing stuff. Tab to edit it. Tank. We're going to scale it up. Grab it over here. Boom, boom, boom. Rotating it. Oops. Rotating it, holding that control button. I told you I was finished and I got sucked back in again because I'm making a tank now. If we're in the F button over here, that's where curves would be normally, but it's text right now, so it changed to a little F sign to let you know that it's a bit of text. We can extrude that text out. So, you know what? If you're making a tank for your kids and they need to know that it's a tank, then you'd have to write tank on the side of it. Otherwise, they'd never know it was a tank. That's going to be a pain in the butt to print, isn't it? But we could, of course, cut that out of the side of it with some Boolean action later on. All right. All right. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video and it's been really useful to you. And thank you for everybody who stuck around for the rest of the tutorial. And I hope you all have a wonderful day and happy printing.